Good morning, everyone. My name is Justin Phillips, and this is the first episode on a new podcast I'm starting about films. I enjoy watching movies, analyzing them, trying to think critically about them, and would like to share that with you all. So today I will be reviewing the new Supergirl movie, as well as talking a little bit about the future of DC, the DCU, where it is up till now, and where it will be heading in the future. I'm going to start with a spoiler-free kind of Supergirl review. For those who haven't seen the film yet and still want to, you can hopefully listen to the first part of this podcast, hear a little bit about my thoughts, but still go and be surprised yourself when you go see the movie yourself. So my expectations going in were pretty high for this one. I love the Supergirl comic that it's based on, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. I have the deluxe hardcover here, and I've been following kind of the DCU news ever since James Gunn initially announced the new plan for DC. I love the heroes from DC, and really hoping for a change after the old DCEU, where there were some really creative ideas in that era, but also a lot of, corporate involvement and trying to make things more like Marvel at times, and really just not succeeding in giving audiences something new and something that they'd find really interesting and groundbreaking. Marvel really was the dominant force in the last decade. And so coming into this decade, Marvel has been losing some steam. DC had new head with James Gunn and Peter Safran, and things are looking up. Last year, the 2025 Superman movie was pretty great. A lot of people liked it, critics and fans alike. It really brought a sense of hope to the world. And then Supergirl's this summer, and I'm very excited about that. As I said, really like the comic it's based on, and I think because of that, it was one of my most anticipated. Sure, Superman was, influenced by Superman for All Seasons and All-Star Superman, of which I've read one of those source materials. But at the end of the day, I knew it was going to be a different story, and went in with the expectation that, Superman, it's its own thing. Supergirl, on the other hand, knew it was going to be sticking pretty close to the source material, so I was very excited about seeing that work come to life. The great writing by Tom King and Bilquis Evely's art is just beautiful in that book, and so was really looking forward to that. The trailer came out a couple months back, and things were looking a little more brown than people had anticipated, and not maybe capturing that essence of the art and the beauty of the comic book. People were a little worried, still very hopeful. And then earlier this week, a Rotten Tomatoes score came out. I believe it was like 57 on Rotten Tomatoes. And so not bad, not great, not necessarily what we were hoping for. So going in, I definitely tempered my expectations a little bit because I have been anticipating this movie for so long. And just really excited to see what it was like. So went in, and I will say, watching there, I was pleasantly surprised, especially with the first half of the movie. They brought color, they brought interesting art direction, some very fun practical creatures. Millie Alcock obviously is doing a great job as Supergirl, and Ruthie really fit the role. I mean, she was cast great for that role of Ruthie. Eve Ridley, that is. And just, really good start to the movie. I really enjoyed it. And towards the second half of the movie, without giving away any, spoilers, the art direction definitely toned down a lot. A lot of the later planets kind of meshed together. There's a lot of brown. There's a lot of dust. You'll see a lot of people comparing it to Mad Max. And originally it was based kind of on the True Grit story of a young girl coming in and, seeking revenge for the death of her father, finding a mentor in someone, in this case, Supergirl, and going on a journey. In True Grit, it's a Western, journey across the Wild West. Here, it's an intergalactic Western in a way. They're traveling from planet to planet. And the comic book does a really good job showing each of these individual planets. Some of these stories are really kind of adjacent. Maybe would have worked better in like a TV show format. So obviously some of that had to get trimmed down for a feature length film, but definitely like kind of just going across the galaxy. And I really liked a lot of the early set pieces. A lot of the early locations were really colorful, really exciting, and then Supergirl and them, they get to the company gets to this kind of dry, deserty looking planet with a kind of dystopian city called Bilquis, which is a reference to the artist. But unlike the artist's beautiful, colorful work, kind of drab, right? And then the final place, Barenton, also very drab. Now that is a very drab, deserty planet in the comic book as well. But just choosing a lot of the planets that kind of look similar to each other, or making them look that way, it just made it a little less exciting visually at the end. I will say the overall story, the acting was pretty good. I enjoyed that. Jason Momoa's Lobo, whether or not he needed to be in the film is a different question, but when he was in the film, he was definitely a commanding presence, really made his character come to life, and it was just really exciting to see him all excited about his character coming into DC again as a character that looks just like him, straight from the comics. Really, really neat. And overall, the overall message of the story I really enjoyed. I thought it was a pretty good, not it's a revenge story, but obviously not encouraging that throughout the course of the action and the course of the film. Also, really liked the origin story elements they put in there. A lot of these, I think a lot of people are tired of superhero origin stories. That's why Superman last year was kind of like kaleidoscope of characters, not really focusing on the origin story, really kind of just launching into the DCU. And with Supergirl, this is a little bit of an origin story weaved into this main revenge story. And as the characters Ruthie and Kara get closer together and start seeing, in the comic book, Ruthie's narrating it, but obviously in the film, you just start seeing them grow closer together and really start to see more of Kara's background and what life was like for her on Krypton, and actually seeing the destruction, unlike her cousin, who was sent away as just an infant. And so, yeah, really enjoyed those elements of it. I thought it did a pretty good job of adapting the comic book. And, movies aren't supposed to adapt things perfectly, so I wasn't going in expecting, like, yes, this is going to be an exact copy-paste of the original comic book, but definitely hoping it would influence it more. So I definitely think after seeing those Rotten Tomatoes reviews going in, really enjoyed it. There was some fun action. There was great acting, great characters, fun like interstellar adventure, very focused too. Like it's not really doing a lot to expand the world. There's no post-credit scene. It's really just, I mean, it is expanding the world in its own way, but in a lot more streamlined, similar to maybe some of those Phase 1 Marvel movies that were very focused on one character and a story with that character. I really liked those movies. I really liked this movie for that. So definitely left the theaters a little more encouraged. Like, yes, this isn't as, maybe the critics are going a little harsh on it. I think critics in general right now go pretty harsh on comic book movies because we've seen so many of them, and we've seen a lot of really great ones too. So once you see them, all of them, it's like, well, okay, does it really add anything new? And I will say Supergirl doesn't really bring something like complete. It is a different feeling. A lot of people were worried to be like Guardians of the Galaxy. It does not feel like Guardians of the Galaxy. It's a mix of a little bit. There's Guardians of the Galaxy elements, there's Mad Max elements, there's True Grit elements, there's Superman, Supergirl elements, and it all kind of just meshes together in its own feeling. But as a film in and of itself, definitely not really doing anything dramatically different or really revolutionary in the superhero movie space. It didn't quite necessarily even leave me with, like, at the end of Superman, you just felt feeling very good, like that sense of hope, and just I think that's what a lot of people resonated with the 2025 Superman movie, with. This little less like that, but it is a very fun movie. I think people will enjoy it. Hopefully, people go and see it in the theaters, and when it comes on streaming, I could see it having a little resurgence there as people who didn't make it to the theaters eventually catch up on it. So, yeah, maybe not the home run that we all hoped it would be, but I think it's a solid movie. It's not bad, and it keeps the DCU moving forward. So really, really enjoyed that. So that's probably where I'll end the spoiler-free review segment, and now I'll kind of walk into a little bit more with a spoiler kind of review. So, in-depth analysis, what really worked here? Millie Alcock's Supergirl, like I said, was great. She really embodies the role well. I'm very excited to see her in future projects like Man of Tomorrow coming up next year. Jason Momoa also did a great job. I personally think I could have used with less of him. He's actually not in the original comic book. And while I don't think he's a bad addition here, I think his presence in Act 2 is super fun. And then they kind of keep him on towards Act 3, where the big finale on the pirate ship with the brigands happens. And did I need him in those elements? Maybe not as much. Really, obviously, liked his character, liked his screen presence. But I think a more focus on Supergirl and Ruthie would have been maybe a little more appropriate and good for this story. I really liked there's a lot of practical creatures, especially early on. And like I said, the art direction early on in the movie, when they're on the space bus, it looks like it's straight out of the comics. There's just beautiful art, and you can see all these just interesting aliens, and they created some new aliens for this too that are like, obviously they're doing their own thing, but there are a lot of puppetry, practical aliens. It felt like how Star Wars should feel. Star Wars has not felt that way much recently. But Supergirl did a great job with that. And I really loved, especially anything with the bus scene, like early on, all these creatures, very cool. Now I'd like to talk about the villain. Now, the villain in this, you're going to hear a lot of people say, oh, he's too boring. I would actually disagree. I think that's exactly what he needs to be, right? This story isn't about the villain. It's not someone we're supposed to see later on in the DCU necessarily. In fact, he does get killed at the end by Kara. But he is just an average guy. And especially in the comic book, he has a red beard, red hair, looks like an average man, just happened to ask for food and shelter from Ruthie's family and then killed her dad. And that's why she's on this revenge quest. It's like, what, we were gracious. We were, offered you our home or food, and you just got in a political argument about the king with my dad, and you killed him. What was that for? That's not just. And I think that's what really makes this story interesting. I think they tried to amp him up a little bit more, giving him the more almost Ravager look from Guardians of the Galaxy, and trying to portray his role with the brigands as like a very, big kind of child slave trade thing going on. And it works. It has its elements. I do think it makes people think that maybe he was supposed to be more important than he was. And in reality, he's supposed to be just some average guy, right? And you see this in like movies by the Coen brothers, right, with Fargo and everything, where your villains are just everyday people. That can happen. And even in a superhero world, it doesn't always need to be a Thanos or a Joker or someone that is just so iconic. It can also be just a regular guy who does harm in his way. And superheroes have to deal with that too. So I think I do wish they had maybe toned down on his Ravager likeness, his pirate aspects, and more focused on him just being an average guy. So people are going to dislike his character. I think it worked. He's not supposed to be this big Joker or Thanos level villain. He's just a bad guy. So yeah, that was something I did enjoy. I think that worked for me. I will also say all the Kryptonian scenes, like the Kryptonian language, whoever they got to do the language, it sounds really cool. I really liked it. a lot of soft sounds, and really kudos to, you know, Millie Alcock and the whole crew there for reciting their lines in a language that doesn't even exist. That's really, really cool. And the set design of Krypton and Argo City, and seeing that story play out, seeing the city being saved from the destruction of Krypton, but then the kryptonite really making a sickness for all the people on that world, and then Kara eventually being sent away to Earth, where her cousin is. Thought that was really interesting. That was cool. It's one of the best issues in the comic book run, is that origin story. And yeah, I thought they did a really, really good job with that. I really liked how they handled it. A lot of people are probably kind of tired of origin stories. They're tired of all this stuff, but it works here, and they found a way. I was worried from the trailer that, like, oh, they try to bring in Superman too much, or bring in, make it just a little, not trust Kara to be Kara and carry her own movie, and she does. And the way they weave in the elements of Superman, her origin story, it doesn't feel distracting from the main plot. It feels like an important part of Ruthie coming to know Kara and what she's been through, and shows us that Kara can relate to Ruthie in all that destruction. And how do you cope with that is the question, right? Do you go drink yourself into oblivion, or do you go and try to seek revenge? And probably neither of those is the answer this film is trying to tell us. So those are some things that worked. Like I said prior, I really didn't love how the last two planets, Bilquis and Barenton is a real planet from the comic books, and it does have a dusty vibe. It actually has dinosaurs there too that bring a little more vibrance to the world. I wish, had they done that, maybe they could have brought in the dinosaurs. They don't even have to be a part of the plot, but in the background to really color the world, because that first half, so interesting with the set design. But then Bilquis, dystopian city in a dusty place, and then they go to Barenton and it's a dusty place. And a lot of the filming for this was like Iceland and Scotland, beautiful places, but a little too similar. And I can see if they were trying to go for a fully Western vibe, but early on, it's definitely kind of space adventure, road movie. And then it turns into this kind of dusty Mad Max apocalyptic look. And I probably would have preferred the art direction to stay with the more colorful look, or even if you have a dusty planet, populate it with interesting things that differentiate it from the other planets. I do think the script itself seemed to really emphasize the point that, revenge is not the way. Killing him is not going to give you what you're looking for, Ruthie, right? They kind of reinforce that several times. And while I love that message, I do think that maybe it was a little too much telling rather than showing. I think they can trust the audience to be smart enough. Even kids who are going to see this, if done well, you can pick up on that meaning without saying it multiple times. So I did think they maybe did that a little bit too much. Like I said with Lobo, maybe not the most necessary character. Loved his energy. Loved how much Jason Momoa has really just been like, yep, I want to be Lobo. I want to be part of this universe. Let me do this. I think that's really cool. And yeah, I think he worked, especially in the Bilquis and the dystopian city with the bar brawl and things like that. That was cool. But then later on, did I need him for the pirate ship finale? Not really. So those are some things that maybe didn't work for me. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of colorful things they could have added, even to these drab planets. I really liked that they brought in the green sun thing. That's a really good thing. That was part of the, Barenton was made for Superman. It was made for her cousin. It has the green sun. It, weakens obviously Kara and any of the super family who have that kryptonite weakness. So really, that was really cool. And I can see, it's actually in the comic book, not the final place they end up. They end up in a different planet that's a lot more tropical. And I have a couple thoughts on how they could have done that, but I'll get to that here soon. Some other things that didn't work: releasing it between Minions and Monsters and Toy Story 5. Probably not the smartest release window. Toy Story 5 is very good if you haven't seen it so far. Going to bring a lot of kids in. Minions are always popular, right? So that's going to bring in a lot of families and kids as well. And Supergirl is kind of competing with that. And while it's the only live action one of the bunch and the only superhero one of the bunch, that, along with the reviews, people might opt out of it, right? They're like, well, we're going to go see Toy Story, or we're going to see Minions and Monsters anyway. We'll just catch Supergirl when it comes to streaming. And that is unfortunate. I enjoyed the film. I think more people should see it. Deadline, though, is now tracking that it's only going to make $40 million through Sunday, and it costs net $186 million, which is pretty cheap for a superhero movie. And I'm glad we're going back to the age of like not $400-500 million superhero films. I think there's a lot of story that can be told at smaller budgets, but then there's all the advertising on top of that. There's a lot they have to make back for it to be profitable. And now, am I worried that like, DC's just going to disappear? No, it's popular. It's especially, Batman, some of your main characters, they're always going to be around. And I think, though, people will be making movies about them for a long time. So, yeah, not worried about it in that case, but definitely for the creators, for the studio trying to, reinvigorate the DC brand, maybe actually make it something it has never been before. Maybe not the best place to place an expensive family movie. So now, that being said, got 7.8 million in previews on Thursday, 18 million on opening day. So maybe it'll only get to 40 million through Sunday, but it could overperform that number a little bit, at least the way it's looking right now. We'll see. Not much. We'll have to see when the weekend finishes. I am recording this on a Saturday morning, and so we won't know until later. So yeah, source material comparison. As I said, I'm not an adaptation stickler when it comes to books and versus movies. Like I've read Dune Messiah, and I'm actually enjoying what they're doing with the films more than the way the books were written. I think it's actually even more in line with what Frank Herbert was wanting to say with the movie, with his books. They're really translating that well in the movies. But with this one, because Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow is probably one of the best, if not the best, modern comic book run, and it's certainly among the greats. You have, your Watchmen, Sandman, Long Halloween, The Dark Knight Returns, all these great comic books of history, and I think it does deserve a place among those top ones. It's a great comic book. If you like the movie and want more, I definitely recommend going out and reading Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. It's fantastic. And so because I love the source material so much, I am a little more picky when it comes to the comparison between that. And so there's a couple of lore differences. We did talk about Krem, how he's a little different in the books. I think that would have really worked well. The planets being named differently, I don't mind that. It's a really cool homage to the creators, the editors, and the artists. But it is a difference. And then we come to the main differences. There's a lot more. Obviously, with a comic book run, it's more in a mini-series format than a movie format. Something had to be cut out. But especially when the first trailer came out, a lot of people were worried this is just going to be Guardians of the Galaxy 4 or whatever, and not its own thing. And I don't think it helped the movie to pick creatures like the Scalarians, which originally appeared in Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes 233 in November 1977. So, they are expanding the world there. But Scalarian Raiders kind of look a little bit like the Ravengers. And the Brigands, the pirates, they, at least art direction-wise in this movie, look a little bit like the Ravengers. And a lot of human or alien-esque tough guys is the villains that they're going up against in most of this movie. And in the book, you have so many different side stories, right? You have a story with, instead of the Scalarian Raiders, the bus gets trapped by like intergalactic space dragons. That's really cool. The Green Sun planet has dinosaurs, as we talked about before. They go to this little town called Maypole that is filled with these characters who look cute and innocent at first, but are nothing like that. And I won't spoil that for people who want to go read the book. But really just a lot of different things. Comet, the super horse, is in it. That really colors the world. The Brigand's pirate ship actually looks like a pirate ship. It really is just such a different look. And I think if they wanted to avoid the Guardians of the Galaxy comparison, focusing more on an art direction and the more fantastical, the book really leans into the fantasy of it all. And leaning more into that would have been really, really cool. So yeah, as you can see, this is the pirate ship, the Brigand's pirate ship in the comic book. It looks like a pirate ship floating through space, kind of steampunky. It really looks cool. It's very its own thing. Doesn't feel like Guardians of the Galaxy. So I think if they wanted to avoid that comparison, that would have been good. Obviously, there's a lot of needle drops in this film, so it's kind of hard to avoid the comparison. But art direction could have gone a little more the fantasy route rather than the Star Wars, Guardians of the Galaxy kind of space look. And that is the look of the bus, but the Ruthie's home looks a little bit more like something you'd see in the Shire. And then going to the prehistorical world in Barrington with all the dinosaurs and the green sun, it just brings this world alive and makes the road trip movie feel a little bit more like a road trip movie. So that's something that's a little different from the source material that I think could have changed. So I would have probably, if it were up to me, I think a few things that could have made this movie better, try to differentiate it a little bit from Guardians, from something people have seen before. I actually think this could be, and this would not work for a family movie, but this could be a 3-hour long slow burn, very grounded visuals, kind of like a Dune or like a Lord of the Rings at the beginning journey throughout space as Ruthie and Kara get to know each other and deal with their pasts. That would have been really cool as well. Obviously, just changing the last two planets, being less gray and dusty, more color would have been cool. Making Krem just a normal guy, I think would have really enhanced the fact that, yeah, normal people can do bad things and it affects us all, and we have to deal sometimes with the consequences of that. That would have been really interesting. Like more creatures at the end. They did really well, like I said, at the beginning with all the creatures, and that kind of tapers off toward the end. Maybe bringing in Comet or bringing in those dinosaurs, bringing in those space dragons. There's a lot they could do. And obviously with trying to do a smaller budget, maybe not all of that was in budget, but I think spreading out a little bit more of those differences. The Maypool creatures. There's a lot of things they could have done with that. So, and then finally, the finale in the comic book ends in a tropical planet called Florinine, I believe. And I think that would have worked really well for the third act, right? You have the dusty dystopian planet of Bilky, and then either they go to another planet, or maybe they go to the dusty part of this green sun planet, and as they're fighting on the pirate ship and it's traveling south before it crashes into the sand, the planet becomes more tropical, and eventually the final standoff is on a tropical beach. That, I think, would have been really cool. One of the most famous pictures from the comic run is of Supergirl herself sitting, looking out at the beach in the final issue. That's, here it is. Her just sitting on the beach. Very tropical vibes. That would have really differentiated it from the rest of the planets in the movie. I think that could have been really, really cool. So, yeah, just making it a tropical world would have helped differentiate it from the rest, and I think make it more visually interesting, maybe keep that momentum they built early on in the film. So those are some of the changes I would have done. That's basically my overall review of Supergirl. The needle drops were fine. I think they could have. I don't know. They're good, but it's it is what it is. There's some interesting covers of songs and things like that. But overall, enjoyable film. It's not as bad as the critics are saying. I think it did waste some of the potential of the comic book, but at the end of the day, it's still a fun movie and is still moving the DCU forward as we're slowly, expanding this world that James Gunn and team are creating. So we'll see. But I would like to now shift to talking a little bit about the DCU itself, where it's going, how things are looking like right now, and what we can maybe look for in the future. So obviously this is the first Rotten Tomatoes score, which is unfortunate. It got a 57%. The last, I think 83% Fresh for Superman, 95% for Creature Commandos, 93% for Peacemaker. All those were James Gunn things. And that doesn't mean I want James Gunn to do everything. I think that is one of my fears with the DCU is James Gunn's vision is to have lots of different films for different people, right? We're getting a body horror movie, Clayface, later this year. That is not for families, hard R rating. That's going to be, that might not even be for all comic book fans. That might bring in some of the more horror fans and horror movie people made on a small budget as well. It was talks of a Korean Huntress, film or series. Lots of different animation stuff coming out as well, all played supposedly by the same voice actors as would be playing the live action counterparts. So it's an exciting time for DC. I'm excited to see where they go. One of my fears would be that James Gunn would take over too much of it, because while I love his movies and love his style, part of what makes the DC exciting to me, the DCU, is all the different ways they can go. Having a horror movie sounds great. Having a more grounded HBO show sounds awesome. We'll see how it all turns out, but that is my current thoughts on that. So yeah, it is unfortunate that this did not do as well with critics. There's some ways it could have done better. I think Craig Gillespie, love his I, Tonya work. Cruella was good as well. He does have a very similar style to James Gunn, so it's a little hard to see. We haven't seen anything that's truly very different yet. And I think we'll get that with Clayface, so we'll have to reevaluate later this year on that. But it's not a bad score either. It's still above 50%. It's not, a dumpster fire. It is enjoyable. It is good. I hope people will go and see it. And yes, not perfect, but it's moving forward. And I will say what we get out of this movie is we get a great Supergirl. We get a great Lobo. And those characters are going to carry over into other projects in the future. That's going to be really cool. Obviously, there's the Paramount and Warner Brothers merger. There's thoughts on, what will happen to the DCU. And I don't know for sure, but I do think Paramount isn't buying Warner Brothers just because they want to, remove someone from the market. They want these characters. They want DC. They want Lord of the Rings. They want Game of Thrones, all these different franchises and stuff and IP that Warner Brothers owns, Paramount's interested in. So I don't think DC's going away. Now, whether it's going to be helmed the same way by James Gunn and stuff, we've yet to see. But so far, I think he's doing a good job. I know people disagree on that. Obviously, it's comic book fans. They're always, fighting about different things. But so far, it's been good. They've been decent or great in times too. So we will see where it goes. I'm excited to see how the world fills out. I think a lot of people forget too, the MCU wasn't built in a day either, right? And so all those Marvel movies that really, later 2010s when everyone was extremely invested in Marvel is not how it started out in 2008 and 2009. They made some solid films early on, but they were often one-off superhero films, not a lot of structure between them yet. And yeah, so it is different. We'll see. I could be wrong. It could all go away tomorrow, but I'm hopeful and I'm excited to see. As a fan of DC, as a fan of comic books, and as a fan of movies in general, not just comic book movies, I'm excited to see where this goes and hopefully where some of the creativity can come from. Not wanting to recreate an MCU, but create something new and different that has a lot of, diverse ideas, horror movies and drama shows and, normal family blockbusters as well. So we will see. I think one thing that has come out of this that people are curious about is what about Ana Nogueira? and she's the scriptwriter for Supergirl. And Variety put out a piece. Owen Gleiberman over there, he wrote, I'll read his quote. He's like, "We're not talking about James Gunn and about the scripts. One of the things James Gunn wanted to do is not have a script done, not have production start until a script was done." And so Owen Gleiberman says, "We're not going into production on any movie until a script we have is rock solid. For that was the overriding problem with the superhero overkill era. The films had lousy scripts, which were used as grids on which to layer the visual effects. Gunn was right to want to take the comic book genre back to well-structured screenwriting basics. So what has he done in his second DC outing? He's given us a comic book movie with the worst script I can remember." That's Owen Gleiberman. That's not me. Yeah, it's not the best script I've ever heard or seen, but I do think that is a little harsh, and people are concerned. Fans were concerned a little bit. Ana Nogueira doesn't have much former screenwriting experience, and she's already been given the reins to Teen Titans and Wonder Woman based on her performance in Supergirl prior to everyone seeing it. And so there are probably some questions of, will she still be attached to those projects? Will she get, replaced? How's this all going to go? James Gunn's a pretty loyal person. He seems to have his people and like his people. I don't think there's that fear. I also don't think it's her first time outing. Now, whether or not she should have been put on the biggest biggest DC project of the year, who knows? That's not for me to say. But it wasn't terrible, and I want to give the benefit of the doubt where I can. We will see how it goes in the future. Now, and it's not just her. There's a lot of other people writing scripts for DC coming out. So I think there will be some hits and misses. That's the, big franchises. That's how now Star Wars is operating that way. Marvel's operating that way. DC's operating that way. These big franchises, you're going to have hits. You're going to have misses. People love the characters. People love the worlds. They're going to come back anyway. So we will see. I think that's a little harsh. Yeah, not the most solid script ever. I think people we're okay to be concerned with someone who doesn't really have much screenwriting background just coming in and writing a big, blockbuster for DC. But it works overall. It's not the most clean. It's not the most perfect script, but it does make an enjoyable movie. So we will see. James Gunn has a lot of faith in her. We'll see how that turns out with Wonder Woman and with Teen Titans later on. So we will see how that goes. Also, I like Supergirl. A lot of these have had a lot of ins and outs. Supergirl also had 3 different composers throughout its process. There was a lot going on, and you can't always blame everything on, people want one person to, it's all James Gunn's fault. It's all Ana Nogueira's fault. It's all this composer's fault, which that would be a kind of far stretch to say. But, a bunch of people come together and make a movie, and so I think the success or the failure, while maybe very influenced by certain people sometimes, it is a team effort. So we'll see. But, looking forward to the future of DC. Looking forward to continuing to podcast, maybe share some of my thoughts on films, not just superhero films. I love all sorts of films, from French New Wave to modern blockbusters to more indie efforts that are going out as well. So hopefully I'll have a lot to talk about on this show. Still don't have a name for the podcast yet, but that'll come in time as well. But thanks for listening, and I'll catch you hopefully next week with the next episode. Planning to talk about Minions and Monsters. It is summer after all, so we got a lot of blockbusters to cover, but that should be next. Thank you all. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.